Okay, I'm sorry to tell you this is our last lesson of the chapter. So this is it. But don't worry, we have another chapter after you do your review and your quiz and all that other stuff. So we're not done with math yet. But today we're going to work with percents again and trying to solve for missing values. But today we're going to solve problems involving percents. So we may need to find the percent, or we may need to look for different parts. So go ahead and write this down along with today's date and page number before moving on. Okay, your warm-up, I'm just going to do 4 simple equations for you. And we've been doing a lot of stuff like this, so it should be pretty easy to solve for the missing value. Come back when you're done. All right, so I showed you that I divided all the coefficients to both sides to get the variables alone. And these are the answers you should have received. Hopefully you showed your work as well in your notebook so that you saw if you're making a mistake or not. All right, so let's get moving. All right, so sloths may seem lazy. That's why my nickname is Sloth. But their extremely slow movement actually helps them become almost invisible to their predators, so they can't be seen. Sloths are the lucky ones. They get to sleep on average 16.5 hours a day. Oh my gosh, does that sound great? Oh my gosh. So to find out what percent of 24 hours in a day 16.5 is, we can set up a proportion, since we know what a proportion is for percent out of 100, or you could use an equation. Today I'm going to focus on the proportion part because I want us to just use what we've already known the whole time. All right, let's get into our first example. Oh, sorry, before we do that, I forgot I have notes here. So there's 2 different methods, as I said. We're going to focus mostly on the proportion method. But there's also the equation method that we've been dealing with too. So remember, when you write a proportion, the tops are the parts, the bottoms are the whole. So you're going to want to copy this down in your notebooks, but I'm just kind of showing you this. So if we were to try to figure out how much percent of a day a sloth actually sleeps, here's how you set it up. So we don't know the percent, so that becomes our variable, but we know percent is out of 100. We do know that the whole day is 24 hours, and part of a day is 16.5 hours that they sleep. So by doing this, we can cross multiply to get 24n, and we can cross multiply 16.5 times 100 to get 1,650. And then we just have to divide both sides by that 24. 24 will go into 1,650, 68 and 75/100th times. So a sloth spends about, you could round it to 69, or 68.75% of the day. That's a lot of sleeping. I wish I could do that. Now, you also could read it as what percent of 24 is 16.25. So percent becomes our variable that we don't know, but we do know that 100% is 24. So that's how we get 24n, and then you're left with 16.5. Now you can see that from here then you have to divide by 24. You're left with a decimal. You have to move the decimal point. It takes a little bit more thinking to get those done compared to the proportion. That's why I'm going to focus on the proportion method today. But you could use either method if you want. And you might want to copy down both before moving on, just in case. They both give you the same answer. They both show you that a sloth is sleepy. All right, so our first example we're going to do, not including a sloth, is looking at what percent of 40 is 25. Now, just a couple things to point out too that I want you to write in your notes. Don't forget, of means multiply, right? We've talked about that. What percent of 40 is 25? What is? When you're writing equations and things, is means equals. Okay? So that helps us to kind of understand what we're going to be doing with our problem. But here we're going to be dealing with proportions. So the first thing you have to do is set up a proportion. Now we don't know the percent, so that becomes our variable. But we do know the percent is out of 100. Anytime you have to write a percent down as a proportion, you know the denominator or the bottom number will be 100. Now the stuff we do know is that 40 is your total or whole, and 25 is your part. And because we know part goes on top and whole goes on bottom, that helps us to set up the second part of a proportion to have 25 on top and 40 on bottom. So now all we have to do is cross multiply or find the cross products. 40 times n is just 40n. And 25 times 100 is 25 with 2 zeros, or 2500. Now to solve this, all we have to do then is multiply, or the opposite of multiplying then is dividing. We're going to divide by that number to get n alone. Okay. Now they both share a 0, so I'm going to make our math a little easy and cross off a 0 on each one of them. So now we just have to see how many times 4 goes into 25 or 250. Okay, 4 can't go into 2, but 4 can go into 25 5 times. All right, let's do the work over here. 4 goes into 25 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. Oh, what do we notice? We actually can do it 6 times. So 4 goes into 25 6 times. And now we don't have 20 down here. We have 24. Okay. So now we have 1 left over. We bring down the 10. And now 4 goes into 10 twice. And when we look at that, we're left with 2. But what do? We still have to do some work. So we add another 0. And we add a decimal point. And we bring down that 0. Now how many times does 4 go into 20? 5 times. And now we're done. So what percent is of 40 is 25? It's 62.5%. So that's how we can solve that. So write this example down so you can see how to use proportions again to solve the work that you're going to be doing today. All right, here's a second one. If you choose to copy this one down, great. If you want to just watch, I'm fine with that too. So now this problem says 15 is, so 15 is, remember is means equal, 25% of, which means multiply, what number? So here we are given a percent. Whenever we're given a percent, we know right away 1/2 of our proportion or one ratio is going to be the percentage. 25 being the part, 100 being the whole. Now, since it says 15 is, that would mean that 25% and 15 are on the same side. 15 is. So when we set up a proportion on the other side, 15 is a part. What we don't know is the whole of what number. So what is the whole? So that's why we get n on the bottom. So once you have a proportion set, now you just solve. Cross multiply, 25 times n gives you 25n. And 15 times 100 is 1,500 when you cross multiply. So now all we have to do is we have to divide 25 to both sides so we can get n alone. Now we have n equals. So to do the work, and I'm just going to bring the n equals down. Oops. I guess I have to erase it. We're going to be trying to figure out what 100% of 15 is. So let's do a little bit of division here. We're going to see how many times 25 goes into 1,500. Now I know it won't go into 1. We know it won't go into 15. So we got to go all the way to 150. And we know that if we were thinking of quarters and we were thinking of 150, that would be 6. And that gives us absolutely nothing left over. So when I bring down to the 0, what do we put in the quotient? That's right, you put a 0. So our answer is 60. Now we're saying to ourselves that 25% of 60 is 15. Now how can we check our work? Remember, it's a plug and chug. So if we put in 60 here, we can cross multiply and we can see if we get the same exact answer. And 25 times 60 will give you 1,500, so you know that it works. All right, so now on your own, you're going to do 1 and 3, and I'm leaving 2 and 4 open in case you want to do some extra practice. So set up your proportion and solve. Come back when you're done. I'll show you my work, and I'll show you my answer, and we'll see if you got the same thing. All right, so for number 1, the percentage we were looking for was 25%. And for number 3, the number we were looking for was 60. So here's how I set up my proportions. For number 1, we didn't know percent, so I knew it was going to be n over 100 at least for my percentage. And then I knew that 100 was the full number of 25, so that's how I set that up. Cross multiplied, I got 2,500, and I got 100. I divided by 100, I got 25. Pretty easy. Number 3, we didn't know for number 3, we did know the percent, and it was 10. So part over whole gave us 10%, or 10 out of 100. And we knew that 6 was 10%, so I put that on top, and we had to find out what the total number was. So when I cross multiplied, I got 610n. I divided both sides by 10, and I got 60. So hopefully you got the same answers. If you want to go over 2 and 4, let's do that. All right, let's get moving. All right, so in example 2, I'm going to show you the multiplication method. Now, if the multiplication method confuses you and you want to stick to the proportion method, go right ahead. But for this one, I've been hinting to you the whole time what these words mean. Remember, is means equals, and of means multiply. So if I was to set up an equation based on the information I see here, everything to the left of the word is would be on its own and then equals. So that means what we're trying to solve for is what 28% of a number is. So we know that we have to, with a percent, is change to a decimal. So that means we got to move the decimal point twice. So we get 0.28. Okay. We're going to multiply by what? We don't know, so let's use the letter n as our variable. Now, we've been doing problems like this the whole year, so I can actually get rid of the times n and just put n. We've been doing problems like this the whole year. We know that to get n alone, we're going to have to divide by 0.28. And what we do to one side, we got to do to the other. And if you do this, you're going to get the answer 125. N equals 125. Now, how did I get that? Well, I had to do 0.28 into 35. Well, this decimal had to be moved twice, so if I move that twice there, I have to move the decimal twice here. So that means I got to end up adding some decimal or some zeros. So now that I have this, I thought to myself, how many times will 28 go into 3? It can't, but it can go into 35 once. And when I was finished finding the remainder, I had 7. So I brought down the 0. And I found out that 28 goes into 70 twice. And 28 times 2 is 56. And when I went through this, I found that I had to borrow here to make that a 6. I got 14 left. And then when I brought down the 0, I saw that 28 goes into 140 evenly 5 times. So I had no remainder. Okay, so that helped me to figure this out. Again, if you wanted to, and I want you to copy this down, but if you wanted to do the proportion piece, you knew that it was going to be 28% over 100, right? And we knew that 35% is 28, so 35 would go on the top, and what we're trying to solve for is what that big number is. And you could cross multiply and figure it out. So I'm just showing you the 2 different ways. This is the equation part. All right, let's look at one more as an equation. I'll even set up the proportion for you in case you're interested. So remember, of means multiply, is means equal. So now we only have one thing to the right of the equal sign, so we're going to write equals 18. Now this time what we're doing is we're looking for a percent of 9, so we're going to have to multiply 9 and percent. So I'm going to do 9p, p standing for percent. So what we have to do is divide both sides by 9. And when we divide both sides by 9, this is gone. Now we're left with p. Now how many times does 9 go into 18? It goes in twice. So you're probably thinking, okay, the percent of 9 is 18 is 2. But that's not exactly it. Remember, percent means out of 100. So we still have to make this out of 100. So how many times do we have to move the decimal point to the right? That would be twice. So when I do that, what do I put as placeholders here? I put 2 zeros. So the percent is actually 200%. Okay, and that may seem tricky to you, but we're looking for 9 times something equaling 18. 18 is a bigger number. Now, if I was to set this up as a proportion to be able to solve it, you don't know the percent, so we know we're going to do n over 100. But we do know that 9 is n, and 18 is the total. Sorry, what I mean is, I did that backwards. 18 is what percent we have, and what we're trying to figure out is what 18% would be if our total was 9. So you can set that up and solve it that way. So whichever way kind of seems best to you, that's what you're going to do. But if it ever says what percent, that means that you have to move the decimal point twice to be able to get your percentage. So for your turn, I want you to do 6 and 8 this time. We'll leave 5 and 7 if you want extra practice. Choose which method you want to use. If you want to use proportion, go ahead. If you want to use the equation method I just showed you, go ahead. I will be showing you the equation method in these two problems on how I solved it, just so you know. Good luck. All right, so my answers are 90% and 200 for 8. So for number 6, when I divided 27 by 30, I actually ended up with an answer of 0.9. But since I knew I was looking for a percent, I knew I had to take that decimal point and move it once, twice. And then I had to put a 0 in that placeholder. That's how I got 90%. Now, if you did the proportion method, you should have gotten the same answers no matter what. Now, I skipped doing the word problems because we already figured out how to kind of read through these. So hopefully you do well on the quiz with that either way. So with the box of thought here, we have 3 problems. I want you to take your time and answer the best you can. And here is your quiz. 5 questions. You can see number 5 has a word problem, but remember, try to figure it out and write it as a sentence, kind of like you have for 1 through 4. See if you can put that together. Good luck. And that's it. That's your last lesson. That's the last part of the chapter. And once you're done with me today, you'll also have your final quiz and your review and your activity plus your test. So good luck on all those, and our next lesson will be in the next chapter.